Alrighty, lads and lassies. I'm recording in the dark right now this little Patreon video that is going to be tied to the Respace video that I just put up on YouTube. I'm going to be going over the Super Saturator, like I talked about in the video. I'm going to go through the back end of it. I'm going to tell you guys about some replacement options in case you don't have the plugins. I'm going to be telling you a couple really deep cut tips and tricks with all of my mixing processing. So, let's open it up. I'm going to crack it open for you guys. And yeah, but first, real quick, I just want to let you know there's not going to be a stream or a VOD for this week because I'm going to be doing Silkenwood Sleepover. And that's going to be taking up a lot of my time this weekend, so I won't be able to do a stream or put up a VOD for you guys. I apologize. And soon there will be a new video on Patreon that I highly recommend all of you guys watch, because that's going to be kind of the guide going forward for how to use the stuff I give you, because I feel like I've been going through kind of learning bits and pieces about Patcher, about Ableton, and having that video to tell you guys like what I'm giving you and what you would need to do in case I've fucked something up in the past to troubleshoot it. It'll be really helpful, I hope. Alrighty, so Super Saturator. I'm gonna open up Patcher. This one is really cool. I'm starting to learn the little interfaces for the Patcher stuff, and that's gonna be something I go over in that video as well. I'm actually just gonna straight up give you guys a tutorial. Not the spectral effector. I'm straight up going to give you guys a tutorial on how like Patcher kind of works. So that way you guys can pick apart my Patcher presets. And I feel like knowing how to pick them apart and also be able to use them will be more helpful for you guys' production processes in the long run than me just giving you these resources and being like, have fun, kiddos. Alrighty. So you'll see on the Super Saturator, it's really simple. There's just a knob on top, a big knob in the middle. The big knob is saturation, and the top knob is input. Okay, so here's the back end of it. Back end of it's a little bit complicated. All these Fruity Formula controllers, you don't need to know what those do. You'll get a video on what these do soon. But these are just doing math essentially. They're just making your lives easier. This is a Patcher preset that's in the chain, so I'm also going to go over what's inside of this. This is a little bit broken. You guys have to stick with me here, because this is probably the most ghetto part of the preset. So it starts off, the chain starts off with a gain. This is where the input gain is. It starts off at a plus 0.26. But it'll obviously, as you turn this knob down, all it does is just turn down this input gain. This is kilohertz gain. If you don't have this, you can just use a Fruity balance and tie a Fruity send, and you can tie your dry knob to the input knob, but your input default position will have to be at 100 instead for the Fruity send. I like this one because you can turn up your input as well in case it's like a super quiet thing. Granted, the processing chain I'm about to show you will show why. If there will not be a reason normally where you would need to turn that input gain up. Most of the time you're turning it down because the sounds you're going to toss into here will come out super distorted without turning down your input. So from there it moves to a trash 2. This is like my generic trash 2, like I said in the Respace video. It's harmonic control. The drive is at a 2.9, and the saturation knob is tied to the mix, and that's all it is. From there it moves to this compressor. The threshold is down here. Attack and release is 10-100. These are defaults for M modern compressor. And then the ratio is at a 2. There's also 15 decibels of gain. So this is where a lot of it starts. The dry wet is what the saturation knob is tied to, but this is just smushing it. This is smushing entirely, just squashed. And that's why it's really, with the respaces, the motion is now really, it's really just a tonal motion instead of like a physical, like this phase cancel is going to mute the input of the respace, because there is rarely an instance where there's not some sort of input coming through and then getting compressed to shit, and that's why the respaces sound so consistently volume. It sounds so consistent with the volume, especially when it's turned all the way up. It is super compressed. Then it goes to this slice EQ. This slice EQ, when you turn up the saturation knob, it moves a little like this. It is pretty basic. I actually did this to cut off or to change the DC offset. It's only for this saturation thing. I rarely cut off like the 20 hertz range because the DC offset generally helps with like transients and with like really lower basses being a more consistent and more honest, I guess the word would be honest, more honest like signal. But when I with it being this processing chain, it sounds better if you have the DC offset cutoff, and of course this 200 hertz cut that I always do with all of my respaces, all of my saturation. I think my mixing in general just has that 200 hertz dip because I don't like 200 hertz very much. It muddies up a lot of things. So for these three, if you want to replace Trash 2, I think Fruity Fast Distortion is probably going to be your best option for like FL Studio natives. Trash 2 is not that expensive when it's on a deal. If you don't have Trash 2, wait till Isotope puts it on the deal. I got it on Black Friday last year, and that was such perfect timing because it was so cheap and it got so much of like the best parts of Isotope's like plugins. You get all of like the best stuff from them, except for like, well, I don't even, the elements aren't that useful, but it's always kind of cool to have the elements. And then you get the plugins that you would actually want, and then you get Trash, you get a couple of others. You don't get like Isotope Ozone or Neuron or the Vocal Synth. I think Vocal Synth is the only thing I would recommend from Isotope, though. I don't think Ozone's all that useful. I don't think Neutron or whatever is all that useful either. And Modern Compressor, just use like a Fruity compressor. You can just, I think the attack, release, threshold ratio, and output is really all you need to replace that really easily. Slice EQ, you can use Fruity Parametric EQ. Just turn the steepness up to like steep 6 or steep 8, and that'll be good. Then that's just a 200 hertz notch. You can do that with Fruity Parametric EQ. Patcher. So this is the Fruity frequency splitter. Obviously, you're going to take the top two bands of the Fruity, not Fruity. Yeah, this is going to be the Acyan frequency splitter. Take the top two bands. You're going to turn them up as the. Hold on, we gotta get the knob here. As they get turned up, it goes up like 0.6 decibels, just a little bit of that top end. This is a really obscure plugin that I found via Imanu and what he does with his processing chains. This is a really strange filter plugin. It's free if you can find it, but it's not for Mac, and it's 64-bit only, or it's 32-bit only. If you want to use it for Ableton, you'll have to use a bridger. I use JBridge to bridge DTBLK. I don't know what it's called. I use JBridge to bridge that to 64-bit for Ableton. But this plugin is super cool. It has a ton of different filter things. The delay actually matters because how much delay you have will change the tone of how the filters actually work. These two are a like starting frequency, and this is the highest frequency, so this is a low and a high. This is going to be an input. I think it only works for some filters, and this percentile will change for some filters. You'll have to play around with it a lot to really understand it, because like I said, it is a super janky plugin, but it can create some really cool effects. I like this having a little bit of smear, um, like it's 7% on 0.01 beats of delay. So it is not doing all of that much, but the little bit of smear is going a long way in the actual processing chain. The saturation knob here is just tied to the mix of that. And then the trash here, this one's on Crunchy Grunge on 2.3. It's tied to the mix. All of these are tied to different things up here. Obviously, the Fruity Sends are all tied to the buttons. So knob 85 and knob 86, I just put those there. And as soon as you add knobs, it'll give you the ability to change those knobs on the patcher. And so you can modify a patcher from within a patcher. So that's how I got frequency splitting in the frequency splitter patcher in my patcher, and how I was modifying parameters of the patcher within this patcher. It's very complicated. From there, you get moved on to another slice EQ. This one looks like this, and then like this with the saturation knob. This is the only one. This is probably the only effect that will actually like matter. With the like a default 0% saturation here. It's with slice EQ, this is a mid-side EQ. Orange is your sides, blues is your mids. So there's like a side cut, a high cut on your sides for about 200 or so hertz. It's not very steep, and then there's a little notch here, and then it increases here. So you'll get a lot more width on the sides in this range here, this 1K range, and then it'll get a big notch at the 200 here as the saturation goes up. This is just the sides, and this is for both because it's in the orange range, so the blue also will affect it, if that makes sense, because the mids and the sides being both cut will mean that they will add together. I promise that makes sense. From that EQ, we then go into a gain. 5 more decibels of gain. 5 more. Then this plugin. This is my new secret weapon. I might make a video on this one in the future, but holy shit, is this clipper the coolest thing ever. I don't know how it works whatsoever, but the clipping, the way it does its clipping is insane to me. This in this case, it just goes from soft to hard. So it's a little bit it's a soft clip here, it's a hard clip here. You can kind of have it be in between, which on its own is really strange. How do you go from like a half soft clip to a hard clip? Well, that's part of the thing. This is a saturator as well, so you can turn up the drive on it. I don't use it as a saturator very often because I think the way that it does clipping is probably the coolest part about it. This knob will come in handy later on, and I'll show you guys that in a second. Goes into, wow, another fucking EQ. Holy shit, this one looks like this. Starts like this, and then it goes like this. The only thing it modifies is just this part here. The sides get increased on the sides here. They get decreased here. Now, you may be thinking, what the fuck are you doing? Isn't this just going to cancel out the other sides that we did earlier? Answer, we don't talk about it. This is a little bit of a janky one. And the reason it's janky is because as each effect changes the sound of it, I might re-EQ it. That's just how I made originally when I made this patch. I just started plugging things in. I redid it. Like, this sounds like it needs this now, so I'm going to do another plugin. This sounds like it needs this now, so I'm going to do another plugin. That's why you might have an EQ that literally cancels out the other EQ from earlier in the process. I think because there is an effect between these two EQs, it will make a difference, but it won't make a very large difference. Then we get put into another compressor. This time, the threshold's a little bit lower. It's pushing it up another 6 decibels. Holy shit. Wow, I'm pushing the fucking shit out of this. There's only a 1.1 ratio. This doesn't do too much compared to the other EQ, and it only goes up to 75% dry wet. And that's because having a little bit of a duplicate version, having a little bit of a compression and having a little bit of a not compression is really cool. Then you push it another 1.5 decibels just to slam it into this clipper. This thing has a thing called detail preservation. This detail preservation is such a cool sound because I have no idea how this algorithm works. I have been trying to work this out with a friend for a while. Once I have an update on how this works, I will tell you, but it like maxes out your frequencies as much as possible with perfectly leaving enough headroom to let other frequencies come through. I have no idea how it works. It is set to 100% hard, but it is detail preservating at a 100%, so you still instead of having just the sub distorting absolutely everything, it somehow lets those highs come in perfectly clean and still letting you have the maximized amount of sub. I do this, by the way, for sub because sub is a big sine wave, and so sine wave, that's my hand motion for it. And this gain is just to slam it into this saturator, this clipper. And that's how you get the super saturator. That's the effect chain. I am hopefully going to remake this for Ableton real quick before I post this video. I'm literally probably going to make it as the video's uploading. If you guys have any questions, do ask below. Oh right, I probably should go over some replacements. As I said earlier, all the slice EQs can be replaced with Fruity Parametric EQs. You will not be able to do mid and side with Fruity Parametric EQ. You will need a third-party plugin to do mid and side because I don't think there is a way to separate mid and side EQ in default native FL Studio. Modern compressor, again, can be done with Fruity Compressor. In here, fast distortion, you cannot replace this. I don't have a good replacement for it because this is a unique sound. So if you want to go find this, it is free. You will need to figure out how to get it to work because it is fucky and it is old and it might require some finagling. It didn't require as much finagling for me, but when I tried to put it in Ableton, it required a lot of finagling. Saturate, this does not have much of a replacement. For the first one, you can easily just put a G clip in here. G clip is a free free hard clipper that GVST put out. You can just put that in there and replace it. The actual detail preserved one is not going to have a perfect replacement. If I had a recommendation, the only recommendation I could give is Fruity Soft Clipper, and that's just about the only thing that I could see quite doing the job that this does. All right. Thank you. I'm going to go and put all of this into an Ableton rack for you guys. So hopefully you'll have a cool saturation knob and input knob for Ableton as well. Again, if you have any questions, do leave a comment. Ask me on Discord. You guys are in the Discord. I will answer it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Goodbye.